I am the founder and chief exec of an organisation called Bad Idea, and it's a social enterprise, and we inspire young people to transform their futures through entrepreneurship. So I set out to find a way to make entrepreneurship more accessible and more inclusive for all young people, regardless of their socio-economic situation, their literacy and numeracy skills, which, as Rachel's pointed out, is very, very important in Glasgow, as we have some disproportionate statistics, really worrying statistics, and that's and I'm a Glaswegian myself. I experienced a lot of the problems that I'm trying to tackle, which I think is one of the really important things within social innovation, is that bottom-up approach to it. And as has been mentioned before, one of the greatest things that's happened to Scotland in a long time has been the referendum. For lots of different reasons, but the main reason is because so many people who were formerly felt disenfranchised or were disenfranchised or now have a real sense of connection to society. They now have a purpose. And are actively getting involved or looking for ways to get involved to be able to become change makers in their own life, in their own communities, and be a part of making change in Scottish society.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Anthony. I'm going to ask Oonagh. I'm going to bring Oonagh.Aitken in there. And Oonagh, again, you've got a kind of a local perspective, but also a wider perspective. Again, just that question about here and now. What do you sense is going on in terms of the context for Scotland just now and context for Glasgow?
Okay. Yeah, I'm one of these people with one foot in two camps. I'm the Chief Executive of Volunteering Matters, which some of you may know by its old name, Community Service Volunteers. Many people have heard of Community Service Volunteers, yeah, probably quite a lot of people. Founded in the 1960s. We've been on quite a journey over the last few years. We're a very different organisation than we were even 2 or 3 years ago. But we primarily believe in the transformative effect of volunteering. So the kind of volunteering that our volunteers do is high social impact, and we believe that they change lives. They change their own lives and they change the lives of their beneficiaries. And I hope I'll get the opportunity perhaps to tell you a bit later about some of the absolutely amazing disruptive things that some of our volunteers do. They really are, I think, some of the unusual suspects that do some fabulous things in terms of changing society. From my point of view, I do find the Scottish context now really interesting. I agree with you. I think we've got a generation of young people in Scotland now who are really engaged. As somebody who grew up in the 60s and went to university in the 70s, the Scottish National Party is a changed beast for me. It was a party in the 1970s, I'm sure there are a few people around the room as old as me, that you would never have voted for in the 70s because they were the tartan Tories and they had no, in my view, sense of social justice or all the things that they now claim to stand for. And I think re-engaging with that younger generation and really making them feel that they've got a part to play in society is something, looking at Scotland from the distance of London, although I'm very frequently back. I'm not completely disconnected from the country. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing, I think there's a really interesting emerging relationship in Scotland between the citizen and the state, and one that I think organisations like ours, and I completely take your point about the third sector. I, like you, have never been third in anything either, and I never refer to it as that. So that's another really interesting dynamic. What is that relationship? How can people be, and the localism agenda, I guess, is my last point. How can people be much closer to the services that they use? How can they get a voice in these services? And how can they start to, I hate the word co-production, but how can they start to influence the way these services are delivered?
Okay, thanks a lot, Oonagh. I wasn't actually asking you to finish, just saying hold your mic up a wee bit, but you're brilliant, okay. Just kind of widening out geographically then, let's bring in Henry. Henry, northeast of England, so you've got, you're just over the border, but I know you're very interested in this whole devolution conversation, this whole thing about localism, and you've been doing some work in Scotland recently. What's your take on how things are here? How do you see the kind of local kind of ecosystem at the moment?
Changing. Okay. Changing quite quickly, changing in quite unexpected ways, and for us, so I run an organisation called Collaborate, and our mission, our reason to think about, do be involved in collaboration, because it's always a means to something, right? Is to transform public services to do exactly what some of the speakers that have already spoken tonight have talked about. I don't think that happens in the same way everywhere. I think what you're seeing in England in terms of the devolution agenda is very different to what you've seen in Scotland. It comes from a different place. It's been mobilised from the top down, you might argue, much more obviously. But I also think that speaks to one of the underlying assumptions around this thing called collaboration, which is, you know, the heart of the unusual suspect, is that it's in some way about coming to agreement on things and agreeing that there is a right way of doing the best for citizens and all getting around the table and then doing it. I think a lot of the time what we find is we're looking for the tension. You know, it's actually about finding some creative tension and holding it. So for me, where is the fight? Where is the disagreement? You know, I can sit here and agree with everything that everybody's said this evening, but somewhere in there's a big power imbalance. And unless some of the events, some of the conversations this week get into that, and I know that's, you know, at the heart of a lot of what Louise and Six have tried to do all around the world, then we're not really doing what's on the ticket. So that for me is the opportunity for Glasgow and what I think is probably more possible in Scotland now at this moment post-referendum than anywhere else in the UK.
Okay, fantastic. Let's come back to that, because that whole thing about the tension and how we manage disagreements and conflict resolution, I mean, some of that's already been in the frame as we've had conversations with some of our presenters who are a wee bit worried about where will all this go, what happens if people don't agree, and actually, well, that's when it sometimes gets most interesting. So let's come back to that. Thanks for raising that. I'd like to bring in Penny, because you've got a very interesting one foot in, one side out, one foot out perspective. So you've got a take on what's happening here, but also what's happening in Greece, where there is a really severe meltdown situation in relation to some of the kind of contextual things we're talking about. So just thinking about Scotland, because we'll come on to Greece, but thinking about Scotland, how do you see the kind of local landscape, and what are the kind of characteristics of this unusual time for you that people are putting their finger on?
Here in Glasgow or in
Scotland generally? Yeah.
Okay, obviously one thing I want to say which is interesting is my own work is about collaboration as a model, actually creativity as a model of collaboration and innovation. So it's quite interesting to be here anyway, because I think that it's a right moment to have such an event in Glasgow, but in general in Scotland. Obviously, we're talking about an environment, post-referendum environment, that has changed quite a lot of things. I've been lucky enough to see the before and after of the referendum. From not here, but from Edinburgh, which is a complete different it was a complete different, I think, experience, but at the same time was really strongly felt. The changes that happened in the environment, and in particular in the sense of communities, of people coming together, of people who were, before the referendum, felt outsiders of taking action, direct action, and felt during the referendum and even after the referendum being part of the mobilization of changes in the Scottish landscape. This is quite interesting to me, because it brings in my mind similarities with things that are happening definitely in Greece, obviously in a different scale, because we have a specific financial crisis. You can't even say any more crisis. It's the everyday experience. But one thing that I could give the example from there and bring it back here is that we had the referendum for different reasons there, but I'm not going to talk about the referendum in Greece right now. But what happened during these, let's say, 6-7 years of the financial crisis there is the issue of collaborative economy that more and more became prominent and became almost like part of the everyday experience of quite a lot of people who weren't part of the collaborative economy before or knowing about it, but became now actors of it. So, and I can see things happening here in community level as well. I have lots of examples that I can share later, probably with regards to Scotland. And if I go back into as well the purpose of being here, a part of being part of this fantastic crowd, is that I'm representing as well Ouishare, which I have to say, which is a global community beginning of enthusiasts, but now we are definitely of a global community and I think and do thank with regards to collaborative society, I can say so. And this is something that I definitely think that could benefit somehow to see that happening and coming here in Scotland. So to me, definitely the referendum has created the right moment of seeing these changes happening in community level and people being active participants and active citizenship, actually. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And each of these panelists will be involved in sessions throughout the next 3 days. You get a chance to hear more from their perspectives, to hear more about what they're doing in each of the individual sessions. So we hope you'll be sticking with us and dipping in and out of the program. We're going to move from Greece to the Netherlands, and you talked about civic participation. And I suppose for me, like for many people, when I think about innovation, when I think about participation, when I think about civic mobilization, you know, the Netherlands is somewhere I automatically think about. And Marlieke Kieboom from Kennisland, which is a think and do tank based in Amsterdam, coming into Scotland and orientating yourself. What's your take on where you've pitched up? What's your take on the landscape and the vibe in town as you make sense of it? What are some of your initial thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for introducing me and thank you for having me here. My first thought is that I'm so happy that I think I'm only a suspected usual to maybe 5% of the crowd today. And because there's nothing more comforting and also nothing more boring, maybe you tend to be amongst your own people always. So I really like it to be an unusual suspect here. And yeah, what I keep thinking about when I hear this unusual suspect theme is I have to think of a boy from my project that I am working on in the municipality of Nijmegen a few weeks ago. I met him in the park, and what he said to me was something quite striking. He said, when you're fucked up, you meet fucked up people. And I was like, so what do you mean? He said, like, yeah, basically that. I don't meet people like you. I said, like, well, yeah, maybe I'm fucked up too. But he was like, yeah. He said, like, but you seem something, it seems like you have something going for you. And you could maybe be the president of the United States if you wanted to, and I can't. So I think in my work, I always try to get the unusual suspects together. This means connecting stories in the city, because there are so many people who have good intentions, and I feel the good intentions in this room as well. But they are so disconnected. It's the policymaker struggling in his municipality or city hall. It's the researcher struggling to not produce a paper, but to try out a podcast or try something else. It's the boy in the park that tries to make a better life for himself. And so to really connect all these unusual suspects in the city is an amazing, great challenge. And yeah, I see this is happening tonight as well, so that's exciting.
Fantastic. Great. What